Welcome. We're here with Following Farmington, and we have our city engineer, Chad Boshell. Chad, welcome.
Thank you.
So if someone were to come to you, a resident off the street, and say, what is engineering over? What do you guys do? What would be the elevator response?
Not much happens in the city that doesn't flow through the engineering department.
Why would a city have their own engineering department as opposed to just outsourcing to third-party engineering firms?
Usually it's for customer care. It's so that when a problem arises, you can get a response from an in-house engineer much quicker than going out of house, and you don't have to wait for the delay and the time it takes. And then you always have somebody that's familiar with the situation, familiar with the city in-house, rather than relearning it before you can solve the issue.
So let's give the residents kind of an overview of maybe 3 or 4 of the big projects that are currently on your desk, so they can get a flavor for what the engineering department is currently touching.
Yeah, so this coming year, we've got about 6 projects that we're working on that should be out to bid. About $50 million worth of projects that the engineering department has developed from the very beginning concept, funded, helped obtain funding, and then we'll bid out and manage the construction. One of those is the future fire station, which we're working with architects right now and other city staff to create funding for it. The other one is the new Ivy Acres Park. We've developed that, we've found the land, we've determined all the utilities that it needs and developed the roads around it, and that one's going out to bid. And then we've got 3 water line projects, a tank, a well, and a water replacement line, and then a road widening. And so it kind of encompasses a good chunk of the departments here in Farmington, and so that's the scope and breadth of the projects that we do. We get involved in all of them.
So we've got this oil, the water tank, I don't know why I called it oil, the water tank and the well, and we just dug that well, and it took forever.
It did.
How to dig that well. Now it was fascinating how they dug that well. They basically bludgeoned their way down to the water line.
Just pulverized everything in their way.
And I wasn't aware, in my mind I had this idea that it was more like an auger that would go down and not just like a giant industrial hammer that just smashes its way down.
Most wells are that way.
Really?
But the other way was cheaper. It just took a couple years longer.
Okay, so we've got this well, and this is different than the tank. Is this water from this well going to feed the tank, or how are we going to distribute that water to the residents?
So this water will be able to distribute through all the pipes we currently have in the city. We don't have to create new water line mains or anything like that. It'll just go straight back into the city and commingle with our other well water.
So there'll be a pump mechanism from that well house, because the tank is quite a ways away from that. Mm-hmm. It'll pump the water into that tank or the other.
The same motor and pump that pumps it out of the ground pushes it into the system.
Oh, interesting.
And we'll push it all the way up to the tank. And then at the new tank site, we'll have booster pumps that will allow us the option to send water to different tanks to equalize the system in case a well on the other side of town goes out.
So one of the questions that a lot of residents will ask elected officials is there enough water for the growth? Now I realize the water supply is not your issue, but does your department already start looking for the next well? We're completing this one, but there's so much demand, there's so much growth in the area that it seems like you've always got to be about 5 or 10 years ahead of the curve.
Yeah. In terms of culinary water, Farmington City supplies our residents with all the culinary water. We have a little bit of backup that we can get from Weber Basin, but we don't need it. We don't rely on it. And so we have all the water rights that we need for growth. We won't need to purchase or find any more water rights, but we do have the need to find new ways to obtain that water through wells. And so with this well, it will diversify our well situation, having wells in different parts of towns, on different rivers. We will need at least one more well before we're built out, and we're already looking for that location because it is such a long process.
Do the tanks have to be stored at an elevated place, or could you have a tank out on the west side and the pumps can handle the distribution?
Theoretically, you could put a storage tank out there, but then you'd be dependent on a pumping system to obtain the pressure that you need for fire and just normal culinary use. What we do decide on is the location of the tank. The current tank that we're going to build is 3 million gallons. At build out, we need 4 million gallons of water to be able to store. And so we decided on this tank to go bigger because it's lower in elevation, which means we won't have to spend as much to pump to it. Our last 1 million gallons that we need to store will be as high up on the mountain as we can go to for those residents that live higher up. There's no need to spend all the extra pumping costs to pump it, an extra 300-400 feet every day, all day for the rest of the life of the tank.
It's kind of fascinating. I mean, your job's way better than mine. Like all the things you get to think about and do, and the projects are so diverse.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about the street improvement on Main Street. We've got to change some water lines. People always ask, what's it going to be like for the residents when you start cutting a line and replacing a line? How does that work if I'm living on Main Street and I know you're going to start the project and I go turn my faucet? What am I going to experience?
The contractors in the city are really good at being able to install the new line, get people switched over to the new line while still keeping them hooked up to the old line that we're abandoning until the last minute.
So we're not talking several days of no water, but there will be several days where water might be temporarily.
So when I say day, the most you'd be out is usually about 8 hours at most.
So that is a chunk of time.
It is, and we try to give ample warning for it. Typically, though, you're usually only off for a few hours at a time as they make the switch. But it does take time to make the switch. You have to cut the lines, reconnect, and then you have to pour concrete around those fittings so that with the water pressure doesn't push and pull the lines apart. So you have to give just enough time for that concrete to set up and have enough pressure on it so that when you turn the water back on, you're not out for a lot longer.
Fascinating. Okay, I've asked every department head this. I'm metaphorically, or in our pretend minds, handing you the Harry Potter wand of power. If I handed it to you and you could wave this wand and change anything about anything about what your department does, what would you change?
Anything that we do, I would probably add an employee or two, another engineer to help on the future projects that we have coming. We're not approaching build out, but we see it. It's on the horizon. And people think, oh, that ends the need of you. But we have water lines that are 80 plus years old in the ground. We have storm drain lines that are over 100 years old. And all that infrastructure is going to need to be replaced. And so to be able to have additional help to plan that and get it takes years of planning of which projects to do to coincide with the street projects so you're not tearing up a brand new street, and also to coordinate the funding for it. That money has to come from somewhere, utility fees, and so constant updating of studies need to happen for all that. So an additional employee would probably get us there so that we can stay on top of all that future infrastructure.
Staffing, interesting.
It's usually staffing.
Now, it was years ago, I was either on the city council, I think I was on the city council, but we started our fund, where our street utility fund. And this was kind of one of your ideas that you brought to the council. Maybe explain to the residents what that is and how it works.
Streets are the backbone of any community. It allows people to come in, spend their money, leave, allows you to travel. And so historically, those streets have been funded through a portion of the gas tax that each city receives, and supplemented through the general fund, sales tax, property taxes. As cities have grown, just like Farmington, more pressure is put on those other revenue sources of sales tax and general tax. People want bigger, nicer parks. People want more rec programs. Fire departments have grown to meet the needs of an aging population. And all those programs rely more on sales tax and property tax. And so the one fund, the one area that suffers were roads. And so over the years, the roads kept deteriorating, and other cities saw this, and there was one city did something about it and created the street utility fee. And so I've been watching that fee for a few years in that city to see how it worked for them. And after I was hired on here, we could see the condition of our roads wasn't getting better. We were falling behind, and so we created the street utility fee with the concept that every resident or every property owner pays based on their use and how many trips they generate per day. And it's been very successful. Our streets department has been able to catch up on our road maintenance so that we're doing it more frequently. If you don't do a treatment every 6 years, after 12 to 20 years, you have to replace the road. But if you treat it every 6 years, the life of the road can extend 50, 60 years before you have to rebuild it.
What would be the cost of replacing like a mile of road versus the cost of just maintaining every 6 years the surface of the road? I mean, in terms of dollars, how can somebody quantify and say, yeah, that's such a no-brainer? Of course we should do that.
To do an overlay for just like a square foot, just 1 square foot of an overlay would cost you 20 cents, but to rebuild a square foot of road would cost you about $5. And so it's a big difference. And that, I mean, to do that today versus $5 in the future, which is really $10 in 20 years, it's a big saving. It's a big difference if we can spend the money now and just maintain and continually maintain, and rather than just wait and rebuild.
Well, you guys do a fantastic job. We're glad that we have in-house engineering, because like you said, there's an expert right there. And when you need an answer, you can just walk down the hall and say, Chad, tell me why this is going to work or why this isn't going to work. And so we appreciate all that you do. Thank you for being here with us. Hope this was informative to our residents.
So,
thank you.
thank you.